He paid just $2 for a collapsing cabin on a frozen mountain, desperate, broke, and running out of time. But when he pried open the rusted hatch beneath those rotting floorboards, what he found wasn't just treasure. It was a secret worth $280 million that would save a dying town and reveal a legacy someone had been willing to kill to protect. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The wind howled through Timber Ridge like a living thing, hungry and relentless, stripping the last golden leaves from the aspens and sending them spiraling into the gray Colorado sky. Winter was coming early this year. Everyone in town could feel it in their bones, that deep cold that settled in the mountains and didn't leave until April. But for Marcus, winter meant something different. It meant running out of time. He sat in his beat-up Ford pickup outside the Timber Ridge Community Center, engine idling to keep what little heat he had going, staring at the handwritten sign taped to the glass door. County tax foreclosure auction. Today, 11 a.m. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, calloused and cracked from years of outdoor work, rope burns, and rough lumber. At 38 years old, Marcus looked a decade older. His face was weathered, lined with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his beard had grown scraggly and unkempt over the past 6 months. He hadn't meant for things to get this bad. 2 years ago, he'd been a successful wilderness guide, running tours through the backcountry, teaching survival skills, leading hunting expeditions. He'd had a small cabin of his own, a thriving business, and Emily. God, Emily. Her laugh had been the kind that made everyone around her smile, bright and unreserved. They'd planned to get married that fall, have kids, build a life together in these mountains they both loved. But cancer doesn't care about plans. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate. It had taken her in 7 months, and with her went everything Marcus thought he was building toward. After she died, he couldn't guide anymore, couldn't smile at tourists, asking about bear safety, or point out elk grazing in meadows while pretending everything was normal. The business dried up. He sold the cabin to pay Emily's medical bills, what insurance hadn't covered, which was most of it. Now he lived in his truck, picked up odd jobs when he could, carpentry, snow removal, firewood delivery, anything to keep gas in the tank and food in his stomach. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The passenger seat was piled with past due notices, truck payment, storage unit, cell phone. The stack had grown so tall it had started sliding onto the floor. Marcus had stopped opening them weeks ago. What was the point? He knew what they said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill and some change, $23.47. That was everything he had in the world until his next job, which wasn't until Friday, 3 days away. He'd been surviving on gas station, coffee, and whatever sandwiches the deli marked down at closing time. He looked at the auction notice again. Most of the properties listed were way out of his range, abandoned commercial buildings, empty lots, a few houses, with minimum bids in the thousands. But there was one listing at the bottom that had caught his eye when he'd seen the notice posted at the post office last week. Lot 47. Remote cabin structure. 15 acres. Severe disrepair. No road access. Minimum bid, $1. $1. Marcus had laughed when he first read it. What kind of place sold for $1? Had to be condemned, probably. Unlivable. But the location was what interested him. The property was up near Devil's Peak, about 12 miles outside town, accessible only by an old logging road that had been washed out for years. He knew that area. He'd guided hunts up there before Emily got sick. It was isolated, harsh, but beautiful in a raw, untamed way. And if he could get it for cheap, maybe he could at least have somewhere to park his truck for the winter. Somewhere He wouldn't get hassled by police for sleeping in parking lots. Somewhere that was his, even if it was falling apart. The clock on his dashboard read 10:53. He killed the engine, pocketed his money, and stepped out into the cold. His breath misted in front of him as he crossed the gravel parking lot. Only 4 other vehicles were there, unusual for a county auction. But then again, Timber Ridge was dying, had been for years. The mine had closed in 1998. The lumber mill followed in 2004. Now the population hovered around 300, mostly retirees and people too stubborn or too poor to leave. Young people fled as soon as they graduated high school. There was nothing here for them anymore. Inside the community center, folding chairs were arranged in rows, facing a small podium. Maybe a dozen people sat scattered throughout, most of them elderly. Marcus recognized a few faces. Harold, who ran the hardware store. Beth, from the diner. A couple of real estate speculators from Denver he'd seen at previous auctions, always looking for vacation properties they could flip. He took a seat in the back row, trying to make himself small, invisible. He didn't want to answer questions about how he'd been doing or accept sympathetic looks that made him feel like he was drowning. The county clerk, a stern woman named Patricia, with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, stepped up to the podium at exactly 11 o'clock. She cleared her throat and began reading through the properties. Marcus only half listened, watching lot after lot go for thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands. The real estate guys from Denver were aggressive, bidding on anything with development potential. Finally, after 40 minutes, Patricia reached lot 47. Next item, she announced, her voice flat and bureaucratic. Parcel number 4, 7238, 15 acres, unincorporated county land, near Devil's Peak. Includes 1 cabin structure, built approximately 1962, current condition, severely compromised. No utilities connected. No maintained road access. Property is being sold as is, where is, with no warranties or representations. Minimum bid is $1. She looked up over her glasses. Do I have a bid for $1? Silence. Marcus glanced around. Nobody moved. The Denver speculators were whispering to each other, shaking their heads. Too remote. Too much work. Harold was studying his auction catalog, like he might have missed something interesting. Beth was knitting. Nobody wanted it. Marcus's heart started pounding. He raised his hand slowly. $1, he said, his voice hoarse from disuse. Patricia looked at him, eyebrows raised slightly. We have $1 from bidder in the back. Do I have $2? More silence. She waited the required 30 seconds. $1 going once, $1 going twice. She brought down her gavel. Sold to bidder number 18 for $1. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, unable to quite believe what had just happened. He'd just bought 15 acres of mountain property for $1. There had to be something wrong with it. Had to be. Nothing that cheap was ever actually good. But it was his. After the auction, he approached Patricia's table to complete the paperwork. She looked at him with something between pity and concern. You know that property's pretty rough, right? She said as she filled out forms. Previous owner died about 7 years ago. An old man named Walter. Kept to himself up there. No family came forward to claim it, so it eventually reverted to the county for unpaid taxes. We've tried to sell it twice before. Nobody's ever bid. Marcus nodded. I know the area. I used to guide up there. You're Marcus, aren't you? Patricia said, recognition dawning. You were with Emily. He swallowed hard. Yeah, I'm sorry about what happened. She was a lovely girl. Patricia's voice softened. You sure you want this property? It's pretty isolated. Winters are brutal up there. I'm sure, Marcus said. I don't have anywhere else to go. She studied him for a long moment, then pushed the deed across the table. You'll need to pay the $1, plus $23 in processing fees. Then it's yours. $23. Marcus pulled out his crumpled 20 and counted out the change. $23.47. He slid $23.25 across the table, keeping back 22 cents. Patricia counted it, stamped the papers, and handed him the deed. Good luck, Marcus. I hope you find whatever you're looking for up there. He walked out of the community center, holding a piece of paper that said he owned land. 15 acres. It felt surreal. Impossible. He'd gone from having nothing to having property, even if it was worthless. Remote property nobody else wanted. He sat in his truck for a long time, just staring at the deed. Then he started the engine and pointed himself toward Devil's Peak. The old logging road was worse than he remembered. What had once been a rough but passable dirt track was now a maze of erosion gullies, fallen trees, and washouts. He had to stop 3 times to move debris, his truck lurching and grinding over obstacles. It took him nearly 2 hours to cover 12 miles. By the time he finally reached the property, the sun was already sinking toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines and bare aspens. Marcus killed the engine and just stared. Severe disrepair had been an understatement. The structure looked like a strong wind might finish it off. The roof sagged dramatically in the middle, missing so many shingles that the tar paper beneath showed through in black patches. One corner of the cabin had partially collapsed. The logs there rotted and crumbling. The single window he could see was broken, jagged glass teeth catching the dying light. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges. But it was his. He stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on pine needles and frost. The air was thin and cold up here, probably around 9,000 feet elevation. His breath came out in thick clouds. Snow was already dusting the ground in the shadows where the sun hadn't reached. He approached the cabin slowly, carefully, testing each step. The wooden porch groaned under his weight, but held. The door resisted when he tried to open it, swollen with moisture and age. He had to put his shoulder into it, and it finally gave way with a shriek of protesting wood. Inside was dark and musty, the smell of rot and mouse droppings and decades of abandonment. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across a single room, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. There was an old wood stove in one corner, rusted through, a table and chair, both covered in dust, so thick it looked like gray felt. Shelves lined one wall, empty except for a few ancient cans and jars. The floor was wood plank, warped and stained. He could see daylight through gaps in the roof, but it had 4 walls, sort of. And when he got the stove replaced and the roof patched, it would be shelter. It would be home. Marcus walked the perimeter, his footsteps echoing hollowly. The floorboards creaked and groaned. Near the back corner, by what looked like it had once been a sleeping area, he noticed something odd. The dust pattern was different there, less accumulated, like something had disturbed it more recently than the rest of the cabin. He knelt down, running his hand across the boards. They were loose. Not rotten, just loose, like they weren't nailed down. Curious, he worked his fingers into the gap and lifted. The boards came up easily, revealing darkness beneath. He angled his phone light down into the hole. It wasn't a crawl space. It was a stairway. Stone steps leading down into what looked like a basement or cellar. That was unusual. Most cabins this old, especially this remote, didn't have basements. Too much work to excavate in rocky mountain soil. Why would someone have gone to the trouble? Marcus's heart started beating faster. He didn't know why. Just instinct, maybe. The same instinct that had kept him alive in the backcountry for 20 years. The sense that something significant was nearby. He widened the opening, pulling up several more boards until he had enough space to climb through. The stairs were solid, carved right into the stone. Not built, but excavated. Someone had put serious effort into this. He descended slowly, one step at a time, his phone light barely cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder as he went down, but it was a different kind of cold, dry, almost sterile. At the bottom, maybe 15 feet below the cabin floor, he found himself in a small chamber. The walls were natural rock, but they'd been smoothed and reinforced in places. And directly ahead of him was a door. Not a wooden door, but a metal one. Heavy, industrial-looking, the kind you'd see on a bank vault. It was covered in rust and grime, but unmistakably solid. A vault door in a basement, beneath a collapsing cabin in the middle of nowhere. Marcus's mouth went dry. He approached it slowly, running his hand across the cold metal surface. There was a wheel lock in the center, like something from a submarine. He gripped it and tried to turn. It didn't budge. Rusted shut, probably, or locked from the inside. He tried again, putting his weight into it. Nothing. Then he noticed something. Near the base of the door, almost hidden in shadow, was a gap. Not large, maybe 3 inches, where the door hadn't quite closed all the way. He knelt down and shined his light through the gap. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Shelves, dozens of them, and on those shelves were cases, wooden crates, glass display boxes. Even through the narrow gap, he could see them glinting. Minerals, crystals, specimens in every color imaginable. Purple, green, gold, deep red. Some were small, the size of his fist. Others were massive, filling entire shelves. They looked organized, labeled, catalogued like a museum collection. Marcus sat back on his heels, his mind racing. The previous owner, Walter, Patricia, had said his name was. Had he been a collector, a geologist? Why hide a mineral collection in a vault beneath a remote cabin? He tried the wheel lock again, straining, muscles burning with the effort. This time, something gave. A tiny movement, barely perceptible, but real. He adjusted his grip and threw everything he had into it. The wheel turned an inch, then another. Then suddenly it spun free, the internal mechanism releasing with a heavy clunk that echoed through the stone chamber. Marcus pulled the door open. It was heavy, so heavy he had to brace his feet and use his whole body. It swung outward slowly, with a grinding screech of metal on stone. And then he was looking inside. The vault was enormous, much larger than the chamber outside it, carved deep into the mountain itself. His phone light couldn't reach the far walls, but what it did illuminate made him dizzy. The shelves weren't just along one wall. They filled the space, row after row after row, extending back into darkness, and every single shelf was packed with specimens. He stepped inside, his boots echoing on smooth stone floor. Up close, the collection was breathtaking. These weren't just pretty rocks. These were museum-quality pieces. He recognized some from his limited knowledge. Massive amethyst geodes, their purple crystals catching his light and throwing tiny rainbows. Clusters of emerald-green malachite. Rose quartz formations the size of his head. Chunks of raw turquoise. Sheets of mica that looked like frozen waterfalls. Gold. God, there was gold. Not nuggets, but specimens. Gold, in its natural form, threaded through quartz. Massive pieces that had to weigh dozens of pounds. Marcus walked deeper into the vault, his sense of reality starting to fracture. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. There had to be hundreds of specimens here, maybe thousands, each one carefully labeled with a small card noting its name, origin, and acquisition date. He picked up one card at random. Aquamarine, Brazil, June 1973. Another. Cinnabar, California, August 1981. Whoever Walter was, he'd spent decades building this collection. Marcus had guided enough geology tours to have a basic sense of mineral values. Even conservative estimates put individual pieces here in the thousands of dollars. The gold specimens alone were probably worth tens of thousands. But this wasn't just a few pieces. This was a massive, comprehensive collection of rare and valuable minerals from around the world. At the back of the vault, he found a desk. It was neat, organized, covered with notebooks, journals, and what looked like appraisal documents. He opened the top journal and started reading by phone light. The handwriting was shaky but legible. July 4, 1994. Acquired the rhodochrosite from Colorado today. Spent my last $300, but it was worth it. The collection is nearly complete now. 40 years of work. 40 years of hunting, trading, saving every penny. I've documented everything. When I'm gone, someone will find this. Someone will understand what I built here. I have no family to leave it to. My wife died 20 years ago. My son, God rest him, died in Vietnam. I have no one, but I have this. My legacy. My life's work. These mountains gave me everything, and I'm leaving it all here, hidden, protected, waiting, for someone who needs it, for someone who will understand. Marcus's hands were shaking as he flipped through more pages, more entries, more specimens documented. Then he found what he was looking for, near the back of the final journal, written in that same shaky hand but weaker, more uncertain. May 12, 2016. I'm dying. Doctor says, I have weeks, maybe days. The cancer is everywhere. I won't make it back down the mountain. I'm staying here, in my cabin, with my collection. I've updated my will, such as it is. The county will take the property when I'm gone. I've left no instructions, because I trust whoever finds this will do the right thing. The collection is worth everything. I've had it appraised at various points over the years. Conservative estimates put it at over $280 million. I spent my whole life building this. Now it belongs to whoever is brave enough or desperate enough to look beneath the surface. Good luck. I hope my life's work brings you the second chance I never got. Walter Hutchins, $280 million. Marcus read that line again and again. 280 million. The numbers didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. He'd paid $2 for this property, including the processing fee. $2 for $280 million worth of minerals. He started to laugh. It came out harsh and desperate, echoing off the stone walls. Then the laugh turned into something else, something between a sob and a gasp. He sank down onto the stone floor, his back against a shelf full of gleaming crystals. And for the first time since Emily died, he cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from disbelief, from the crushing weight of hope he thought he'd lost forever. He didn't know how long he sat there in the dark, surrounded by a dead man's legacy. But eventually, the cold seeped through his jacket, and he forced himself to move. He gathered up the journals, took dozens of photos with his phone, and climbed back up the stone stairs into the cabin. Night had fallen completely. Through the broken window, he could see stars scattered across the sky, so bright and dense this far from any town. His truck was parked outside, cold and empty, his home for the past 6 months. But now, he had options. Now, he had something. He pulled out one of the journals and opened it to a page at random, reading by the glow of his phone. Walter had traveled the world for these specimens. Morocco, Brazil, Australia, Afghanistan. He'd traded, bartered, saved, sacrificed. Each piece had a story. Each one represented months or years of effort. And he'd hidden it all up here, in the mountains he loved, beneath a cabin nobody wanted. Marcus thought about the deed in his pocket. Lot 47, $1. He thought about the 22 cents he had left to his name. He thought about Emily and how she'd always believed things happened for a reason, even when he couldn't see it. Maybe especially when he couldn't see it. He didn't know what to do next. Didn't know if the collection was really worth what Walter claimed, or if the old man had overestimated in his isolation. Didn't know if he could even legally keep it, or if the county would try to claim it. Didn't know if anyone else knew about this vault. But he knew one thing. He'd come here broken, desperate, at the end of everything. And somehow, beneath the rotting floorboards of a $2 cabin, he'd found something impossible. Whether it was treasure or trouble, salvation or curse, he'd found it. And his life would never be the same. Marcus locked eyes with the darkness of the vault entrance. One more time before heading back up. The cold mountain night pressed against the broken windows, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. He was alone on this mountain, with a secret worth $280 million. And the real question wasn't what he'd found. It was what would happen when the world found out. Marcus didn't sleep that first night. He couldn't. He sat in his truck with the engine running for heat, wrapped in his sleeping bag, staring at the dark silhouette of the cabin against the starlit sky. Every few minutes, he'd pull out his phone and scroll through the photos he'd taken of the vault, of the specimens, of Walter's journals. Each time, his brain tried to reject what he was seeing. $280 million. The number was so enormous it felt fictional, like a lottery jackpot or a movie plot, not something that happened to broken men living in pickup trucks. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He had to know if it was real, had to verify what he'd found before he told anyone, before he even let himself believe it. The problem was, Marcus knew next to nothing about geology or mineral valuation. He could identify basic stuff: quartz, mica, fools, gold from real gold. But that was the extent of it. Everything he knew came from guiding geology students on field trips years ago. He needed expert help, but he couldn't exactly walk into a mineral appraiser's office with photos of a secret vault and expect discretion. As the sun climbed over the eastern peaks, painting the snow-dusted pines in shades of gold and amber, Marcus started the truck and began the rough journey back down the mountain. His mind raced the whole way, planning, calculating, worrying. If the collection really was worth what Walter claimed, it would solve every problem in his life. He could pay off debts, get a real place to live, maybe even restart his guiding business. But that kind of money also brought complications: taxes, legal questions, and people. People always came sniffing around when they sensed money. Back in Timber Ridge, he parked outside the public library, a small brick building that looked like it had been built in the 1930s and hadn't been updated since. The library was one of the few public buildings still open in town, staffed by volunteers most days. Marcus hadn't been inside in years, not since before Emily got sick. He pushed through the heavy wooden door, and a bell chimed overhead. The interior smelled like old paper and furniture polish. Rows of battered bookshelves stretched toward the back. A few elderly patrons sat at reading tables, absorbed in newspapers and magazines. Behind the circulation desk sat a woman Marcus didn't recognize, which was unusual in a town this small. She looked to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. She glanced up as he approached, and he caught intelligence in her eyes, sharp and assessing. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was warm but professional. Marcus realized he probably looked rough. He hadn't showered in 3 days, his beard was wild, and his clothes were dusty from crawling around the cabin. "Yeah, I need to do some research. On minerals, geology stuff." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Okay, are you looking for general information, or something specific?" "Specific. I need to know how to identify valuable mineral specimens, and how much they might be worth." He hesitated. "It's for a project." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'm Elena. I'm the new librarian. Been here about 3 months." She stood and came around the desk. "We don't have a huge geology section, but we have some basics, and I can show you how to access online databases if you need more detailed information." Marcus followed her to a corner of the library where a small shelf held books on regional geology, rock-hounding guides, and a few college-level textbooks. Elena pulled down several volumes. These are probably your best starting point. The Audubon Guide is good for identification. This one, she tapped a thick hardcover, has information on mineral markets and valuation, though it's from 2012, so the prices might be outdated. That's perfect. Thank you. She handed him the books, but didn't leave. You're Marcus, right? You used to run wilderness tours? He tensed slightly. Yeah. How'd you know? Small town. People talk. Her expression softened. I heard about your girlfriend. I'm sorry. Marcus looked away. Thanks. If you need help with research, let me know. I used to be a reference librarian at the Denver Public Library before I moved here. I'm pretty good at tracking down information. She said it casually, but something in her tone suggested she was genuinely offering, not just being polite. I might take you up on that, Marcus said. He spent the next 4 hours at a corner table, surrounded by books and his phone, cross-referencing specimens from his photos with identification guides. The more he learned, the more his hands shook. Walter hadn't been exaggerating. If anything, he might have underestimated. Marcus recognized dozens of specimens now. There were rhodochrosite crystals from the Sweet Home mine in Colorado, some of the finest examples he'd ever seen, worth tens of thousands each. Multiple large gold in quartz specimens from California and Alaska, each potentially worth 6 figures. A massive aquamarine crystal from Brazil that could easily be worth $250,000. Emeralds, rubies, rare benitoite from California, painite from Myanmar, one of the rarest minerals on Earth. He found references to auction results, to private sales, to museum acquisitions. He started making notes, conservative estimates based on what he could verify. Even being cautious, lowballing everything, the numbers climbed past 50 million, past 75 million, past 100 million. His coffee went cold. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. This was real. This was actually impossibly real. Around noon, Elena appeared at his table with a sandwich and a bottle of water. You've been here 5 hours and haven't moved. Figured you might be hungry. Marcus looked up, surprised. You didn't have to do that. I know, but you looked like you were going to pass out. She set the food down. Find what you were looking for? He glanced at his notes, then quickly closed the notebook. Maybe, still figuring it out. Elena pulled out a chair and sat across from him. You know, I've been doing this job long enough to recognize when someone's researching something important, something they're not sure they should talk about. She kept her voice low. Whatever you found up on that property you bought, it's got you pretty rattled. Marcus froze. How did you know I bought property? County deed records are public. I process them for the library archives. She leaned forward slightly. Marcus, I'm not trying to pry, but if you need help, actual help, I'm offering. No judgment, no strings. I just moved here because I wanted a quiet life after a bad divorce. I don't have any agenda, except maybe making a friend in this town, where everyone's known everyone else for 40 years. He studied her face, looking for deception, for angles. He'd been burned before by people who seemed helpful but wanted something. But Elena's expression was open, genuine, and more than that, he was exhausted. Exhausted from carrying everything alone. From having no one to talk to since Emily died, from shouldering every burden and every fear by himself. If I tell you something, he said slowly, and it sounds crazy, would you at least hear me out before you call the cops or a psychiatrist? Elena smiled. I promise to listen to the whole crazy story before making any calls. So, he told her. Not everything, but enough. He told her about the cabin, about finding the hidden staircase, about the vault filled with minerals. He showed her some of the photos on his phone, zooming in on specimens and labels. He told her about Walter's journals, about the old man's 40-year quest to build something meaningful. And he told her about the estimate, $280 million. Elena was quiet for a long time After he finished, she picked up his phone and scrolled through the photos again. Her expression thoughtful. Finally, she said, "That rhodochrosite specimen, the big one in the third photo. I've seen that before." Marcus's heart skipped. "What? Not in person? In a journal article? Hold on." She stood and disappeared into the back office. She returned a few minutes later with a printout. Mineralogical record, March 2003. There's an article about significant rhodochrosite finds from the Sweet Home mine. That specimen is mentioned by name. The Walter Hutchins collection. She pointed to a paragraph. It says here that Walter Hutchins was a legendary collector, known in mineral circles but incredibly private, refused to sell pieces, refused to exhibit publicly. The article estimates his collection at over $40 million, but that was 22 years ago, and they admit they'd only seen a fraction of it. Marcus grabbed the printout and read it twice. He was real. The collection is real. Looks that way. Elena sat back down. Marcus, if even half of what's in those photos is authentic, you're sitting on something extraordinary, and probably complicated as hell. What do you mean? Well, first, there's the legal question. You bought the property fair and square, which probably means you own anything on it or in it. But the county might argue they didn't know about the collection, that it should have been disclosed. Then there's taxes, estate taxes, capital gains if you sell anything, and authentication. You'd need experts to verify and appraise everything properly, which means people knowing about it. Word gets out about something like this, and you're going to have problems. Treasure hunters, thieves, people claiming Walter promised them pieces, lawsuits, the works. Marcus felt his momentary elation deflating. So, what do I do? Elena tapped her fingers on the table, thinking, you need a lawyer, a good one, who specializes in property law and estates. You need professional appraisers, probably several, for documentation, and you need to secure that cabin. If someone else knows about this collection, and they might, Walter was part of a collecting community, then your property could become a target. I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford gas. Then you need to sell something, Elena said practically. One small piece. Something valuable enough to fund the next steps, but not so significant that it draws attention. Use that money to get legal help and proper security. Then figure out the rest. It made sense. Cold, practical sense. But the thought of removing even one specimen from Walter's carefully curated collection felt wrong, like he'd be violating the old man's trust. Walter spent 40 years building this. He wanted it to stay together. He wrote that in his journal. Walter's dead, Elena said gently, and he left it to whoever found it. He wanted it to help someone. If selling one piece helps you protect the rest and build something meaningful, I think he'd understand. But that's your call. What happens next will test Marcus in ways he never imagined, reveal threats he didn't see coming, and force him to choose between staying silent and doing what's right, even when the cost is everything. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Marcus spent that afternoon back at the cabin with Elena. She'd closed the library early, claiming a personal emergency, and followed him up the mountain in her old Subaru. The drive was brutal on her car, and twice Marcus had to help her navigate over particularly rough sections, but she was determined. If I'm going to help you figure this out, she'd said, I need to see it with my own eyes. When they finally reached the clearing, and Elena saw the collection for the first time, she stood in the vault doorway, speechless. Marcus watched her face cycle through disbelief, awe, and something like reverence. She moved slowly between the shelves, not touching anything, just looking. My God, she whispered. It's beautiful, all of it. They spent 2 hours documenting everything more thoroughly. Elena had brought a digital camera and a notebook. She photographed each shelf, each specimen, making careful notes of labels and conditions. She was methodical, organized, treating it like the research project it was. Marcus watched her work and felt grateful for the help, for having someone else who knew, who understood the magnitude of what they were dealing with. As the light started to fade, they sat on the cabin floor, with Walter's journals spread between them, reading through years of entries. The old man's life emerged in fragments. He'd been a geologist by training, worked for mining companies in his youth. His wife, Margaret, had died of pneumonia in 1974. His son, Daniel, had been killed in Vietnam in 1968, just 19 years old. After those losses, Walter had retreated to these mountains, spending his remaining decades hunting for specimens, traveling to gem shows, making trades, pouring all his grief and love into something that couldn't die or leave him. He was lonely, Elena said softly, closing one of the journals. This whole collection, it was his way of holding onto something, of creating a legacy when everyone he loved was gone. Marcus understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. Yeah, so what are you going to do? Before Marcus could answer, they heard it. A vehicle engine, distant but growing closer. Marcus's blood went cold. Nobody came up here. Nobody even knew this road existed anymore. He stood quickly and moved to the broken window. Through the trees, he could see headlights bouncing on the rough trail, still a half-mile away, but definitely coming toward the cabin. "We need to hide the vault," Marcus said, his voice urgent. He and Elena rushed to replace the floorboards, working frantically. The boards dropped back into place just as the vehicle, a mud-splattered Jeep Cherokee, pulled into the clearing. Two men got out. Marcus didn't recognize them. They looked to be in their 50s, both wearing expensive outdoor gear that screamed weekend warrior, not locals. One was tall and thin with silver hair. The other was shorter, stocky, with a red face and suspicious eyes. Marcus stepped out onto the porch, trying to look casual despite his hammering heart. "Can I help you?" The tall one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry to bother you. We're a little lost. Didn't expect to find anyone up here." He had a faint accent. "East Coast, maybe Boston. Road's pretty rough," Marcus said carefully. "What are you looking for?" "Just exploring. We heard there was some good rockhounding in this area." The man's eyes drifted past Marcus to the cabin, assessing. "This your place?" "Yeah. Interesting spot. Been here long?" The questions felt off. Too casual, too practiced. Marcus's instincts, honed by years in the wilderness, screamed that something was wrong. These men weren't lost rockhounds. They were looking for something specific. Just bought it. Fixing it up. Marcus kept his voice neutral. "But there's not much good rockhounding around here. Mostly just pine trees and granite. You'd have better luck down near Buena Vista." The stocky man spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, challenging. "That so? We heard different. Heard there used to be a collector up here. Old guy named Walter something." Marcus's stomach dropped, but he kept his face blank. "Don't know anything about that. Like I said, just bought the place at county auction. It's been abandoned for years." The tall man's smile widened. "Of course. Well, sorry to bother you. We'll head back down." But neither of them moved. They stood there, watching Marcus, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Elena appeared in the doorway behind Marcus. "Hey, babe, I can't find the camping stove. Did you leave it in the truck?" She played it perfectly, casual, like she belonged there. The presence of a second person seemed to shift the dynamic. The two men exchanged a glance. "Enjoy your evening," the tall one said. They climbed back into their jeep and turned around. But slowly, deliberately, Marcus watched until their taillights disappeared into the trees. His hands were shaking. "Those guys weren't lost," Elena said quietly. "No, they weren't." Marcus turned to face her. "They knew about Walter. They're looking for the collection. How would they know? Mineral collecting community. Maybe. Walter said he was known in those circles. Or maybe they heard rumors, local legends, about a crazy hermit with a secret stash. Hell, maybe they tried to find this place before and couldn't until they saw someone had actually bought the property. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. Either way, we've got a problem. They decided Marcus should stay at Elena's house that night instead of the cabin. It felt safer, less exposed. Elena lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, cozy and filled with books. She made soup while Marcus paced her living room, his mind racing. I should call the sheriff, he said. Tell him about those men. And tell him what? Two guys asked for directions. Elena ladled soup into bowls. Marcus, you need to think this through. The moment you involve the authorities, the moment you tell anyone official about that collection, it becomes public. The county might try to claim it. You'll have legal battles before you even know what you've got. But if those guys come back, then we deal with it. But right now, you need to make a decision. Are you going to try to keep this quiet and handle it yourself? Or are you going to go public and deal with the consequences? She set a bowl in front of him. There's no perfect answer. Both paths have risks. Marcus stared at the soup, watching steam curl upward. He thought about Walter, alone in that cabin for decades, protecting his collection from a world that would have commodified it, stripped it for parts, scattered it to the highest bidders. He thought about the care in those journal entries, the love poured into each acquisition. And he thought about what Elena had said earlier. Walter wanted this to help someone. Hiding forever wouldn't honor that wish. Neither would letting it be stolen. I need to do this right, Marcus said slowly. I need to protect it. But I also need to make it mean something. Walter built this collection over 40 years. It should be preserved. Together. Maybe in a museum or educational center. Something that respects what he created. Elena sat across from him. That's a big vision for a guy who couldn't afford coffee yesterday. I know. But selling it off, piece by piece to private collectors, that's not what Walter wanted. He could have done that himself any time. He kept it hidden because he was waiting for the right person to find it. Someone who'd understand its value beyond dollars. And you think you're that person? Marcus met her eyes. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just desperate enough and broken enough to believe I could be. He paused. Will you help me? I can't do this alone. I don't even know where to start. But if you'll help me figure it out, navigate the legal stuff, research options, I'll split whatever comes from this. 50-50. Elena shook her head. I don't want your money, Marcus. Then, why are you helping? She considered the question. Because when I moved here 3 months ago, I was running from a life that fell apart. Bad marriage, worse divorce, lost my career in the process. I came to Timber Ridge because it was small and quiet, and I could disappear. But disappearing isn't the same as healing. Maybe helping you with this, building something meaningful, maybe that's what I need too. A purpose, a reason to stop hiding. She smiled. Plus, this is the most interesting thing that's happened in this town in decades. I'm a librarian. I can't resist a good story. They talked late into the night, making plans, listing priorities. First, Marcus would select one specimen to sell, something valuable but not irreplaceable. He'd use that money to hire a property lawyer and get proper security for the cabin. Meanwhile, Elena would research museums, mineral preservation organizations, and potential partners who might help them figure out how to handle the collection responsibly. It felt overwhelming, impossible even, but it also felt like movement, like progress. Marcus slept on Elena's couch that night, the first real sleep he'd had in months. When he woke to morning light streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Not just the desperate hope of survival, but the kind of hope that comes from having a purpose, a direction, something to build toward. Elena handed him coffee. You know this is going to get complicated, right? Once you start selling pieces, once you hire lawyers and experts, word's going to spread. You'll have collectors, dealers, maybe journalists. Your quiet life is about to get very loud. I know. Marcus sipped the coffee. It was good, strong, better than the gas station stuff he'd been living on. But I've been quiet for 2 years. Been hiding, grieving, barely existing. Maybe it's time to get loud. Maybe it's time to actually do something that matters. Then, let's start, Elena said. She pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything you remember from those journals. Every detail about Walter, his travels, his acquisitions. If we're going to honor his legacy properly, we need to know his story completely. They spent the morning going through Marcus's notes and photos. Elena was a trained researcher, and she worked methodically, creating a database of information. She identified patterns in Walter's collecting, periods when he'd focused on specific regions or mineral types. She cross-referenced dates with historical events, gem shows, mining discoveries. A picture emerged of a man who'd been passionate, knowledgeable, and incredibly patient, willing to wait years for the right specimen at the right price. He was brilliant, Elena said, scrolling through images on her laptop. Look at this progression. He started with common but beautiful specimens in the 60s, built his knowledge and reputation, then used that to access rarer pieces. By the 80s, he was acquiring museum-quality specimens that most private collectors could never touch. And he did it all on a modest income. Never selling, just trading and saving. Why didn't he ever go public with it? Marcus asked. He could have been famous in collecting circles, could have exhibited, written books, shared what he knew. Elena was quiet for a moment. Maybe because once you go public, it's not yours anymore. It belongs to everyone. The criticism, the judgment, the commodification. Walter lost everyone he loved. Maybe the collection was the one thing he could keep just for himself, the one relationship that couldn't hurt him or leave. She looked at Marcus. Until now. Until he left it for someone else to decide what it becomes. The weight of that responsibility settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. He'd bought a $2 cabin looking for shelter. Instead, he'd found a legacy that required him to be something more than he'd been. Required him to step back into the world he'd been hiding from. That afternoon, Marcus returned to the cabin alone. He needed to choose which specimen to sell first. It felt monumental, like a betrayal, even though he knew it was necessary. He descended into the vault and walked the rows slowly, examining options. He settled on a piece of rhodochrosite, not one of the massive showcase specimens, but a beautiful mid-sized crystal cluster from Argentina. The label said Walter had acquired it in 1998 for $800. According to Marcus's research, similar pieces had sold recently for between $12,000 and $15,000. Enough to hire a lawyer and get started. Not enough to attract major attention. He carefully wrapped the specimen in bubble wrap from his truck, then placed it in a padded box. His hands lingered on it for a moment. "I'm sorry, Walter," he whispered to the empty vault, "but I promise I'm going to protect the rest. I promise I'll do right by what you built." As he climbed back up the stairs, Marcus noticed something he'd missed before. Scratches on the stone wall near the vault door. Fresh scratches, not weathered like the rest of the stone. Someone had been here. Recently, someone had tried to force the vault door. His blood went cold. Those men from yesterday, or someone else. How many people knew about this place? He took photos of the scratches with his phone, then quickly closed up the cabin and drove back down the mountain. His mind raced the whole way. Someone was actively looking for the collection. The threat wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was real, immediate, and closing in. He needed to move faster, needed to secure the property, get legal protection, and figure out who was trying to get to the vault before they succeeded. Back in town, Marcus went straight to Elena's house. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? He showed her the photos of the scratches. Someone's been trying to break in. Maybe those guys from yesterday. Maybe someone else. I don't know. But we're running out of time. Elena's expression hardened. Okay. No more waiting. Tomorrow morning, we're driving to Denver. I have a friend who's a property lawyer. We're going to tell him everything and get proper legal protection. Tonight, you're staying here. And we're both staying awake. If someone's desperate enough to try breaking into that vault, they might come looking for you next. She wasn't wrong. As darkness fell over Timber Ridge, Marcus sat by Elena's front window, watching the empty street. Every car that passed made his heart race. Every shadow seemed to hold threat. He'd gone from having nothing to lose to having everything to lose in the span of 48 hours. Somewhere out there, people were hunting for Walter's collection. And Marcus, whether he was ready or not, was now its guardian. The weight of $280 million in minerals pressed down on him. But so did something else. Purpose. For the first time since Emily died, he had a reason to fight, to protect, to build something meaningful. He wasn't going to let anyone take that away. Not thieves, not bureaucrats, not his own fear. Walter had left him a second chance. Now he just had to survive long enough to use it. The drive to Denver took 3 hours, and Marcus spent most of it staring out the window, watching the mountains give way to foothills, and then the sprawl of the city. Elena's friend, David Chen, practiced property law out of a modest office in Capitol Hill. He was in his mid-40s, sharp-eyed and careful, the kind of lawyer who asked questions twice to make sure he understood completely. Marcus laid everything out. The auction, the cabin, the vault, Walter's journals, the estimated value, the men who'd showed up asking questions, the fresh scratches on the vault door. David listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Marcus finished, David sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he finally said. First, the good news. You bought the property legally, at a public auction. Colorado law is pretty clear that when you purchase real estate, you acquire everything attached to or within that property unless specifically excluded in the deed. The county deed makes no mention of a mineral collection, which means it's yours. Legally, you're in a strong position. Marcus felt tension he didn't know he'd been holding release slightly. And the bad news? The bad news is that strong legal position doesn't mean people won't try to take it from you. The county could argue they didn't know about the collection and that it should have been disclosed. They'd probably lose, but they could tie you up in court for years. Private parties could claim Walter promised them pieces, or that they have receipts proving ownership of specific specimens. And if the collection is worth what you think it is, you're looking at serious tax implications. Estate taxes, capital gains. If you sell anything, the IRS is going to be very interested in this. So, what do I do? David tapped his pen against the legal pad. We establish clear ownership immediately. I'll file documentation with the county confirming your acquisition of all property contents. We'll get the collection professionally, appraised and photographed for insurance and legal purposes. And we'll set up a legal structure, probably an LLC or trust, to hold the assets and protect you personally. This is going to cost money up front, but it'll save you exponentially more down the road. Marcus pulled out the carefully wrapped rhodochrosite specimen. I brought this to sell. Should cover your retainer and get us started. David examined the crystal cluster, turning it carefully in his hands. It's beautiful. But Marcus, before you sell anything, I need to make sure you understand the implications. Once you start liquidating pieces, you're confirming their value publicly. That information will spread. You'll have collectors, dealers, and probably treasure hunters descending on Timber Ridge within days. I know, but I need money to protect what's left. I can't do that sleeping in my truck. Fair enough. David set the specimen down gently. I have a contact at a reputable mineral dealership here in Denver. I'll set up a meeting for this afternoon. We'll get this appraised and sold quietly. That should give us enough operating capital to move forward." The dealer, a woman named Sharon, who operated out of a warehouse in the Arts District, confirmed Marcus's research. The rhodochrosite was authentic, high quality, and currently marketable at $14,500. She cut a check on the spot, no questions asked beyond provenance, which David smoothly handled by explaining it was from a private estate. By evening, Marcus had more money in his pocket than he'd had in 2 years. It felt surreal, dangerous even, like he was carrying a target on his back. They drove back to Timber Ridge after dark, both exhausted, but wired with nervous energy. "Tomorrow," David said before they parted ways at Elena's house, "I'll start the legal filings. But Marcus, I need you to be careful. If someone's already tried to break into that vault, they're not going to stop just because you hired a lawyer. Consider getting security up there. Cameras, motion sensors, something." Marcus nodded. With $14,000, he could actually afford that now. He spent that night researching security systems, comparing options, making lists. Elena sat beside him on her couch, her laptop open, working on her own research. She'd been digging into Walter's background, finding old articles, gem show records, anything that might explain who knew about the collection. "I found something," she said around midnight. "An article from Rocks and Minerals magazine, 2009. It's an interview with collectors about their most prized specimens. Walter's mentioned. He talks about his rhodochrosite collection, says he spent 30 years assembling it. But here's the interesting part. The interviewer asks if he'd ever consider selling or exhibiting publicly. Walter says no, that the collection is for someone who'll understand its true value beyond money. He knew, even back then, he knew he was going to leave it for someone to find. Marcus read the article over her shoulder. Did he say where the collection was kept? No, just that it was safely stored in the mountains he loved. But Marcus, look at who else was interviewed in this article. She pointed to a name, Gerald Crane. He's a major private collector, owns millions in specimens. In his interview, he mentions trying to buy pieces from Walter for years and being refused every time. He sounds bitter about it. You think Crane sent those guys to the cabin? I don't know, but it's a lead. If Walter was known in collecting circles for refusing to sell, there could be dozens of people who've been waiting years to get access to his collection. The moment word leaked that you bought the property, they'd have come running. The next morning, Marcus was back at the cabin with a contractor from Denver, a quiet man named Ray, who specialized in security installations for rural properties. Together, they mounted motion-activated cameras at all approaches, installed reinforced locks on the cabin door, and set up a wireless alert system that would ping Marcus's phone if anyone approached. The whole thing cost $6,000, but it was worth it for peace of mind. While Ray worked, Marcus descended into the vault and began a more thorough inventory. He photographed every specimen, documented every label, cross-referenced Walter's journals. It was painstaking work, but necessary. If he was going to protect this collection, he needed to know exactly what he was protecting. He was deep in the vault, photographing a spectacular wolfenite specimen, when his phone buzzed with an alert. Someone was approaching the cabin. He climbed the stairs quickly and peered through a gap in the boards. A county vehicle was pulling into the clearing. Not the sheriff, but a truck marked county assessor. Marcus's stomach dropped. He stepped outside just as a man in his 60s climbed out, carrying a clipboard. The man had a politician's smile, practiced and empty. "Marcus, right? I'm Bill Hodges, county assessor. Mind if we talk for a minute? About what? Your property purchase. See, we've had some questions raised about the sale. Some irregularities that need addressing." Hodges's smile didn't waver, but his eyes were calculating. "There's been some concern that the property value was significantly understated at auction. If that's the case, we might need to reassess your tax obligations." Marcus felt ice in his veins. Someone had talked. Someone had told the county there was value here. The property was listed accurately. Severe disrepair, no road access. You can see for yourself the cabin's practically falling down. Oh, I'm not talking about the cabin. Hodges glanced toward the structure with obvious disinterest. I'm talking about potential assets that may not have been disclosed during the auction process. You see, if there were valuable items stored on the property, and the county wasn't aware of them, well, that changes things significantly. I bought the property as is, where is. Whatever was here is legally mine. Hodges's smile finally slipped. That's debatable. If the county can prove we were misled about the property's contents, we have grounds to void the sale, or at minimum, reassess your purchase price to reflect the true value. We're talking hundreds of thousands in back taxes, Marcus. Maybe millions. Can you afford that? The threat was clear. Pay up or lose everything. Marcus kept his voice steady. I have a lawyer. You want to discuss this further? Talk to him. He pulled out one of David's business cards and held it out. Hodges didn't take it. No need to make this adversarial. I'm just here to help ensure everything's above board. But I should warn you, the county has significant resources at its disposal. Fighting us would be expensive. Might be easier to work out an arrangement. Maybe donate some of those valuable items to the county museum as a gesture of good faith. Get off my property. Now, Marcus, this is a legal purchase. I have documentation. You want to challenge it. Go through proper channels. But right now, you're trespassing. Marcus held Hodges's gaze until the older man finally looked away. We'll be in touch, Hodges said, climbing back into his truck. Through official channels. As soon as the assessor's truck disappeared down the trail, Marcus called David. The lawyer listened to his description of the encounter, his tone growing increasingly grim. They're going to come after you hard, David said. This Hodges, he's probably working with someone who wants access to the collection. They'll use bureaucratic pressure, threaten you with tax liens, property seizures, anything to force you to give up pieces or sell out cheap. Can they actually void the sale? No, not legally. But they can make your life hell trying. Marcus, you need allies. You can't fight the county apparatus alone. Is there anyone in Timber Ridge who might support you? Business owners, community leaders, anyone with influence? Marcus thought about the town. Most people barely knew him anymore. He'd been invisible for 2 years, just another broken man scraping by. But Elena knew people. She'd been networking, making connections through the library. Maybe, he said. Let me talk to some folks. That evening, Elena called an informal meeting at her house. She'd reached out to people she'd gotten to know over the past 3 months. Folks she thought might be sympathetic. Harold from the hardware store showed up, along with Beth from the diner. There was Father Miguel from the Catholic Church, Sarah who ran the food bank, and Tom, a retired teacher who'd lived in Timber Ridge for 40 years. 7 people total, counting Marcus and Elena. Marcus told them everything, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. He needed help, and help required trust. He showed them photos of the collection, shared Walter's story, explained what he'd found and what he was trying to protect. The room was silent when he finished. Harold spoke first, his gravelly voice thoughtful. I remember Walter. He'd come into my store once a month, buy supplies. Never said much, but he was always polite, paid in cash. I always wondered what he did up there all alone. He was building something beautiful, Elena said. Something that could mean a lot for this town if we handle it right. How so? Beth asked. Think about it. A $280 million mineral collection, properly displayed and protected, could become a major tourist attraction. Geology students, collectors, families on vacation. We could build a museum, create jobs, bring life back to Timber Ridge. But only if Marcus can keep it. Right now, the county's trying to take it through bureaucratic intimidation. Father Miguel leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "Witnesses," Marcus said. "Character references. People who can testify that I bought the property legally and in good faith. People who'll stand up at county meetings and say this collection should stay here, should benefit the community. I can't do this alone. The county assessor came at me today with threats. He'll come at me again with lawyers and officials. I need people backing me up." Tom, the retired teacher, adjusted his glasses. "I've lived here 63 years, watched this town slowly die as the jobs left and the young people followed. If what you're saying is true, if this collection could actually help Timber Ridge, then I'm in. We all deserve a second chance. The town and you." One by one, the others nodded. Sarah promised to spread the word through her food bank network. Beth said she'd talk to other business owners. Harold offered to help with physical security, said he had friends who could patrol the mountain road. Father Miguel said the church would provide meeting space and community support. They weren't a powerful coalition, just ordinary people tired of watching their town fade. But they were something Marcus hadn't had in years. They were a community. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. The county filed a formal challenge to Marcus's ownership, claiming undisclosed assets warranted a sale review. David filed counter motions and requested a public hearing. Meanwhile, Marcus received 3 more visits from strangers asking about Walter's collection. One claimed to be a journalist. Another said he was a mineral dealer authorized to make an offer. The third didn't bother with a cover story, just said he'd heard there were valuable specimens and wanted to see them. Marcus turned them all away. But the pressure was mounting. His security cameras caught people attempting to hike up to the cabin at night, turned back only by the rough terrain and motion-activated lights Ray had installed. Someone tried to bribe Harold's teenage employee for information about Marcus. A post appeared on a mineral collecting forum, asking if anyone had access to the legendary Hutchins collection in Colorado. The word was out. The secret couldn't be contained anymore. Elena suggested they get ahead of it. "If we're going to go public anyway, let's control the narrative. Tell Walter's story the way it deserves to be told. Explain what you're trying to do with the collection. Make it about legacy and community, not just money." She reached out to a friend who worked for a Denver newspaper. The resulting article ran on a Sunday, front page of the regional section. Mountain Man discovers $280 M mineral collection in $2 cabin, a legacy hidden in the Colorado wilderness. The story was everything Marcus had hoped for and feared. It told Walter's story with respect and detail. It explained Marcus's situation honestly, a struggling guide who'd stumbled into something extraordinary. It talked about the potential for a museum, for education, for revitalizing a dying town. But it also painted a target on his back. By Monday morning, Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Collectors, dealers, lawyers, reporters, treasure hunters. Everyone wanted a piece of Walter's legacy. Elena helped him screen calls, set up a single email address for legitimate inquiries, and ignore the rest. But the real problem came Tuesday afternoon, when Marcus received a certified letter from the county attorney's office. They were moving forward with seizure proceedings, claiming the collection constituted undisclosed assets that materially affected the property sale. They were giving him 30 days to prove ownership or surrender the collection for county custody pending resolution. David was furious when Marcus forwarded him the letter. "This is overreach, blatant overreach. They have no legal standing for seizure. We're going to fight this hard. But Marcus, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly." The county hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Marcus spent the week preparing with David, gathering documentation, organizing evidence. Elena helped compile Walter's journals into a coherent timeline, showing decades of legal purchases and trades. Harold and the others gathered petition signatures, over 200 people from Timber Ridge and surrounding areas, all supporting Marcus's ownership and his vision for a community museum. The night before the hearing, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on Elena's couch, going over notes, trying to anticipate questions. Elena emerged from her bedroom around 2 a.m. and found him still awake. "You need to rest," she said. "I can't. If I lose tomorrow, I lose everything. Walter's legacy, the town's future, any chance I had of building something meaningful." He looked at her. "I can't let that happen." "You won't. Because you're not alone anymore." She sat beside him. "A few weeks ago, you were living in your truck with $23 to your name. Now you have lawyers, security systems, community support, and a purpose. You've already won in the ways that matter. Tomorrow's hearing is just paperwork." But it wasn't just paperwork. The county commission chambers were packed when Marcus arrived with David and Elena. The local news had sent cameras. Mineral collectors filled the back rows, some supporting Marcus, others clearly hoping to pick up pieces if the county seized the collection. Bill Hodges sat in the front with the county attorney, looking confident, too confident. The hearing began with formal procedure, statements of purpose, introduction of parties. Then the county attorney, a severe woman named Patricia Vance, presented their case. She argued that the collection represented undisclosed assets worth hundreds of millions, that the county had been deprived of proper compensation, that the sale should be voided, or Marcus required to pay fair market value for the property's contents. She presented appraisals from hired experts, claiming the collection could be worth even more than reported. She made it sound like Marcus had pulled off some kind of heist. When it was David's turn, he methodically dismantled every argument. He showed that county records had described the sale accurately. The cabin was in severe disrepair. There was no maintained road access. The listing had said, "As is, where is." No disclosure was required for contents because the county assessor had never asked, had never inspected the property thoroughly. He presented Colorado case law, establishing that real estate purchases include all contents unless specifically excluded. He argued that the county's attempt to seize the collection was legally baseless and practically motivated by financial greed. Then, Marcus took the stand. The county attorney tried to paint him as an opportunist, someone who'd taken advantage of a loophole. But Marcus told the truth, simply and directly. He explained his situation, his struggles, finding the vault by accident, learning about Walter's life through the journals. He talked about the old man's intention that the collection help someone who needed it, someone who would understand its value beyond money. And he shared his vision for what the collection could become, not a private treasure locked away, but a public resource, a museum that would educate and inspire, something that would bring life back to Timber Ridge. Walter spent 40 years building something beautiful, Marcus said, not for himself, but for someone he'd never meet. He wanted it to matter, to mean something. I'm trying to honor that. I'm trying to do right by his legacy and by this community. Taking the collection away from me doesn't serve justice. It just serves bureaucracy and greed. The commissioners asked questions, deliberated briefly. Then the chair spoke. This commission finds insufficient grounds for seizure or sale voiding. The property purchase was conducted legally according to established county procedures. Mr. Marcus Thorne has clear title to the land and its contents. However, the chair paused. Given the extraordinary value of the assets in question, we are requiring a full appraisal for tax assessment purposes within 90 days. A certified gemologist approved by the county will need access to the collection. Failure to comply will result in property liens. This hearing is adjourned. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. The collection was his, legally, officially his. As people filed out of the chambers, Several townspeople approached Marcus to congratulate him. Harold clapped him on the shoulder. Beth promised him free coffee for a month. Father Miguel invited him to speak at Sunday service about second chances, but not everyone was pleased. As Marcus left the building with Elena and David, they passed Bill Hodges and Patricia Vance, conferring in hushed tones. Hodges looked up and caught Marcus's eye. The expression there was cold, calculating. This wasn't over. Not for him. Outside, a man approached Marcus. 50s, expensive suit, confident smile. Marcus Thorne, I'm Gerald Crane. I believe your friend Eleanor has researched my name. So, this was the collector from the magazine article. I wanted to congratulate you on your win today, and to make you an offer. $200 million for the entire collection. Cash. Immediate transfer. You'd never have to work again. Marcus stared at him. $200 million. More money than he could comprehend. Enough to solve every problem, buy every comfort, live any life he could imagine. Not interested, he said. Crane's smile dimmed. You should think carefully. Managing a collection like that, dealing with insurance, security, public access, it's enormously complex and expensive. You're in over your head. Take the money. Let professionals handle the specimens. Professionals like you, who'd lock them away in a private vault where no one else can see them. Marcus shook his head. That's exactly what Walter didn't want. The collection stays together. It stays public. It stays in Timber Ridge. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Marcus walked past him toward the parking lot. Elena fell in step beside him, grinning. You just turned down $200 million. Yeah. You realize people are going to think you're insane. Probably. Marcus stopped and looked back at the courthouse, at the town beyond it, at the mountains rising in the distance. But Emily used to say, the only way to honor a gift is to use it the way it was intended. Walter gave me a second chance. Selling out to some rich collector isn't using it right. Building something that matters, something that helps people, that's using it right. That night, Marcus returned to the cabin for the first time since the hearing. He descended into the vault and stood among the specimens, letting the silence settle around him. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Sheriff just called. Someone tried to break through your gate. Motion sensors scared them off but thought you should know. Be careful. Marcus responded with a thumbs up, then pocketed his phone. People weren't going to stop trying. The hearing had made the collection more famous, more desirable. He'd have to be vigilant, careful, prepared for whatever came next. But standing there surrounded by Walter's life work, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since Emily died. He felt ready. Ready to fight. Ready to build. Ready to prove that sometimes broken people could protect beautiful things. That sometimes the person with nothing was exactly the right person to guard everything. Outside, winter wind howled through the pines, but inside the vault, everything was still, safe, waiting, just like Walter had intended, just like Marcus would make sure it stayed. The winter that followed was the hardest Marcus had ever lived through, and he'd survived plenty of Colorado winters in the backcountry. But this wasn't about cold or snow. This was about pressure, constant and unrelenting, from every direction. Gerald Crane didn't give up after being refused. He sent representatives every week with increasingly elaborate offers. $300 million, $350 million. A partnership where Marcus would retain partial ownership, but Crane would handle all logistics. Marcus refused them all, but each refusal made him question himself. Was he being stubborn? Foolish? Throwing away generational wealth because of some idealistic notion about legacy? The attempted break-ins continued. His security cameras caught shadowy figures 3 more times in December alone. People trying to reach the cabin under cover of darkness. The motion sensors and lights deterred them, but Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before someone got through. He started sleeping at the cabin several nights a week, a shotgun propped beside the door. listening to every creak and groan of the old structure. The isolation that had once felt peaceful now felt exposed, vulnerable. Elena kept him grounded. She'd essentially become his partner in everything, helping navigate the endless bureaucratic requirements, researching museum development, coordinating with David on legal structures. They'd formed a non-profit called the Hutchins Legacy Foundation in January, with Marcus as president and Elena as director. The foundation's mission was clear: preserve Walter's collection, make it publicly accessible, and use it to educate and inspire future generations. But missions didn't pay bills. The certified appraisal required by the county took 6 weeks and cost $18,000. The appraiser, a stern geologist named Dr. Patricia Morrison from the Colorado School of Mines, spent 3 full days in the vault, examining every specimen with professional precision. Her final report confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The collection was worth even more than Walter's estimate. Current market value, $312 million. The number made Marcus physically ill. The property taxes on assets worth that much would bankrupt him within a year. David found a solution through a conservation easement. By placing the collection in the non-profit foundation and designating it for educational purposes, Marcus could dramatically reduce the tax burden. The catch was that he'd no longer personally own the specimens. They'd belong to the foundation, to the public trust. He couldn't sell them off for personal gain, even if he wanted to. It felt right. It felt like what Walter would have wanted. By March, they had the legal structure in place. Now they needed the impossible: funding to actually build a museum. David estimated they'd need at least $5 million to construct a proper facility, install climate control and security systems, hire staff, and operate for the first few years until tourism revenue could sustain them. Marcus had around $6,000 left from selling the rhodochrosite. It wasn't even close. Elena had an idea. We need to sell more pieces. Not many, just enough to fund construction. Walter had thousands of specimens. If we carefully selected a few dozen of the less historically significant pieces, ones that don't compromise the educational value of the collection, we could raise what we need. Marcus hated the idea of breaking up the collection, but Elena was right. They couldn't protect or share the specimens if they remained locked in a vault beneath a collapsing cabin. He spent a week in the vault, consulting with Dr. Morrison, identifying pieces that were beautiful but not unique, valuable but not irreplaceable. They settled on 38 specimens that could be sold through reputable dealers and auction houses without damaging the collection's integrity. The sales took 3 months and generated $8.2 million, more than enough to begin construction. But the process was agonizing for Marcus. Each piece that left felt like a small betrayal, even though he knew it was necessary. He photographed each one before it was packed and shipped, maintaining detailed records so they'd always be part of the collection's documented history, even if no longer physically present. While the sales were ongoing, the community rallied in ways Marcus never expected. Harold organized a volunteer construction crew, retired miners and loggers who knew how to work with mountain terrain. They donated hundreds of hours, clearing the road, reinforcing the trail, creating safe access to the property. Beth started a fundraising campaign through her diner, collecting donations from locals and tourists passing through. Even small amounts, $5 here, $20 there. People wanted to be part of something meaningful. Father Miguel led a different kind of effort. He reached out to schools, universities, and geological societies, explaining the vision for the museum. His letters emphasized educational value, the opportunity for students to see world-class specimens without traveling to major cities. His passion was contagious. Within weeks, 3 universities committed to bringing geology classes for field trips once the museum opened. 2 more pledged small financial donations. It wasn't much individually, but it added momentum, proof that people believed in what they were building. By June, construction began, not on some modern steel and glass structure, but on a careful expansion and restoration of Walter's original cabin. Marcus and Elena had decided the museum should honor where the collection had been housed for decades. They'd reinforce the cabin's structure, restore the logs and roof, but maintain its character. Then they'd build a climate-controlled vault extension underground, accessed through the original entrance Walter had created, preserving the sense of discovery that had changed Marcus's life. The architect they hired, a woman named Jennifer, who specialized in historic preservation, loved the concept. "We're not building a museum," she said. "We're revealing one that was always here. We're just making it safe and accessible." She designed the expansion to blend seamlessly with the mountain landscape, using local stone and timber, creating something that looked like it had grown from the earth rather than being imposed upon it. Construction was scheduled to take 8 months. Marcus worked on-site every day, swinging hammers alongside Harold and the volunteer crew. The physical labor felt good, purposeful, like he was building not just walls but a future. Elena managed logistics, coordinating deliveries, scheduling inspections, handling the endless paperwork that came with non-profit construction. As word spread about the project, something unexpected happened. People started coming to Timber Ridge just to see the construction. Geology enthusiasts, mineral collectors, people who'd read the newspaper article or seen social media posts about the discovery. They'd park in town and hike up the rough road, cameras in hand, hoping to glimpse the legendary collection. Beth's diner started staying open longer to accommodate visitors. Harold's hardware store saw sales increase for the first time in years. The motel on the highway, which had been running at 20% occupancy, started booking rooms. The town was waking up, slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. Marcus watched it happen with a mixture of pride and disbelief. He'd bought a $2 cabin to have somewhere to sleep. Now he was rebuilding an entire community. Tom, the retired teacher, approached Marcus one afternoon at the construction site. "You know what you've done here," he said. "You've given people hope, not just about the museum or tourism or money. Hope that things can get better. That decay isn't inevitable. That's worth more than any mineral collection." But not everyone was happy. Bill Hodges, the county assessor, who'd tried to seize the collection, made life difficult whenever possible. He sent inspectors to find code violations. He delayed permits. He questioned every financial transaction, looking for irregularities. David handled most of it, but the harassment was constant, a low-level pressure designed to make Marcus give up or make a mistake. The situation came to a head in August. Marcus was working on the museum's entrance, fitting a heavy timber beam into place, when Hodges showed up with 2 county sheriffs. "Marcus Thorne," Hodges announced formally. "We have a warrant to inspect the premises for unauthorized construction." Marcus climbed down from the scaffolding, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Everything's permitted. You've seen the paperwork. We've received reports of unpermitted excavation, possible environmental violations, and safety hazards." Hodges held up the warrant. "We need to inspect the vault immediately." Marcus's blood went cold. Letting county officials into the vault meant giving them access to everything, every specimen, every document. Who knew what they might claim was improperly stored or illegally obtained? "Call my lawyer," Marcus said. "We don't need your lawyer's permission. We have a warrant." Hodges moved toward the cabin entrance. That's when Harold stepped in front of him. Then Beth, who'd been bringing lunch to the crew. Then Father Miguel. Then a dozen other volunteers who'd been working on site. They formed a line, not threatening, just present. A wall of community members who decided they'd had enough of bureaucratic bullying. "You want to inspect? Fine," Harold said calmly. "But you're doing it with lawyers present, proper documentation, and witnesses. We're not letting you go on a fishing expedition to shut down this project. Because someone's paying you to. Hodges's face reddened. You're obstructing county officials. We're exercising our rights as citizens and volunteers of a non-profit organization, Elena said, stepping forward with her phone out. And I'm documenting this entire encounter. So, please, proceed however you think appropriate. I'm sure the State Attorney General's office will be very interested in the video. The sheriffs looked uncomfortable. One of them, a younger man, Marcus, vaguely recognized from high school, spoke up. Bill, maybe we should come back with the Foundation's lawyer present. Keep everything clean. After a tense moment, Hodges lowered the warrant. Fine. We'll reschedule. But this isn't over. He stalked back to his truck, the sheriffs following with apologetic shrugs. As soon as they left, Marcus felt his knees go weak. Elena grabbed his arm. You okay? Yeah. Just realized how close we came to losing everything. He looked at the people surrounding him, ordinary folks who'd taken time from their lives to stand up for something they believed in. Thank you. All of you. Harold waved it off. That's what neighbors do. Besides, we're all invested now. This museum succeeds. The whole town succeeds. We're not letting Hodges and whoever's pulling his strings ruin that. The attempted inspection had an unintended consequence. It made news. Local TV stations picked up the story of county officials harassing a non-profit trying to build a museum. Social media amplified it. Suddenly, Timber Ridge and the Hutchins Legacy Foundation had supporters across the state. People donating small amounts, sharing posts, calling their representatives. Within a week, 2 state legislators reached out, offering to help navigate county bureaucracy. The pressure on Hodges evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. By October, the museum was taking shape. The cabin had been restored beautifully, its logs treated and sealed, the roof replaced with historically accurate materials. The underground vault extension was complete, a stunning space with custom shelving, LED lighting that wouldn't damage specimens, and climate control maintaining perfect temperature and humidity. Jennifer the architect had designed it to evoke a natural cave system, with stone, walls, and gentle curves that made visitors feel like they were descending into the earth to discover hidden treasures. Marcus and Elena spent 3 weeks carefully moving specimens from the old vault to the new one, arranging them by type, region, and educational value. Dr. Morrison consulted on the layout, suggesting groupings that would tell stories about geology, mining history, crystal formation, and Earth's processes. Each specimen got a new label with not just its name and origin, but information about how it formed, why it was significant, and a note about when Walter had acquired it. The centerpiece was a massive amethyst geode from Brazil, nearly 6 feet tall, its interior lined with deep purple crystals that seemed to glow under the lights. Marcus placed Walter's photograph beside it, the one from his journals, showing him as a young man standing beside this same geode at a gem show in 1976. The old man's pride was visible in that photo, and Marcus made sure visitors would see it, would understand that this collection wasn't just rocks. It was a human story of passion and dedication. The grand opening was scheduled for November 5th. As the date approached, Marcus found himself unable to sleep, not from worry, but from anticipation. The museum had become more than a project. It had become his purpose, his way of honoring both Walter's legacy and Emily's memory. She would have loved this, loved seeing something beautiful and meaningful emerge from pain and struggle. The night before the opening, Marcus walked through the completed museum alone. The cabin glowed warm, with carefully installed lighting. Informational panels told Walter's story, his life, his losses, his lifelong passion. The descent into the vault felt magical, like stepping into another world. And the specimens themselves, properly displayed and lit, were breathtaking. He'd been living with them for months, but seeing them as visitors would, he understood their power. These weren't just pretty stones. They were windows into deep time, into the creative force of the planet itself. Elena found him there, standing in front of the amethyst geode. Ready for tomorrow? I don't know. What if nobody comes? What if we built all this and people don't care? She laughed. Marcus, we've had over 3,000 ticket reservations. We're sold out for the first month. People care. 3,000? He couldn't process that number. 3,000. We've had inquiries from school groups in 5 states. A documentary crew wants to film here. And Gerald Crane's office called. He wants to schedule a private tour. She smiled. You changed everything. For the town, for yourself, for everyone who'll walk through these doors and see what one person's passion can create. The opening day dawned clear and cold, the mountains sharp against a brilliant blue sky. By 8 a.m., the parking area they'd created near the property was full. By 9, cars lined the road for a mile. By 10, when Marcus cut the ribbon stretched across the cabin's entrance, over 500 people were there. Locals and visitors, collectors and families, press and politicians. He'd prepared a speech, but when the moment came, he set aside his notes. 6 months ago, I was living in my truck with $23 to my name, he began. I'd lost the woman I loved, lost my business, lost any sense of purpose. I bought this cabin for $2 because I was desperate and had nowhere else to go. What I found underneath it changed my life. But not because of money or value, because of what it represented. A man named Walter Hutchins spent 40 years building something beautiful, not for fame or profit, but because he loved it, because it gave his life meaning after he'd lost everything that mattered to him. He left it for someone who needed it, someone who would understand that some things are worth protecting, not because of what they're worth, but because of what they represent. This museum is that protection. It's my promise to Walter that his life's work will inspire and educate people for generations. It's my thank you to this community that stood by me when powerful people tried to take it away. And it's proof that second chances are real, that broken people can build something whole, that sometimes the smallest investment, $2 and a leap of faith, can change the world. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus saw Beth crying, Harold grinning, Father Miguel nodding approvingly. He saw Elena watching him with pride, and something else, something warmer that made his heart skip. And he saw in his mind's eye Emily smiling, telling him she'd always known he'd find his way back. The first visitors descended into the vault, their gasps and exclamations echoing up the stone stairs. Marcus watched them discover what he'd discovered, that sense of wonder at Earth's hidden beauty. He saw children's faces light up at the colorful crystals. He saw geology students taking careful notes. He saw an elderly woman break down crying in front of the rhodochrosite specimens, explaining to her husband that she'd studied geology for 40 years and never seen examples this perfect. The museum exceeded every expectation. In its first month, over 8,000 people visited. Hotels in Timber Ridge were fully booked for the first time in a decade. Beth hired 3 new waitresses to handle diner traffic. Harold expanded his store. 2 new shops opened on Main Street, one selling mineral specimens and books, another offering hiking gear and local crafts. The elementary school, which had been slated for closure due to declining enrollment, got a reprieve as families started moving back to the area, drawn by jobs and renewed economic vitality. Marcus used admission fees and gift shop revenue to start the Walter Hutchins Memorial Scholarship, offering full tuition to Colorado School of Mines for students studying geology or mineralogy. The first recipient was a girl from Timber Ridge, the daughter of one of the miners who'd volunteered on construction. She gave a speech at the award ceremony about how she'd never thought about college until the museum opened, how seeing the collection made her want to understand the Earth more deeply. By the 1-year anniversary, the museum had welcomed over 50,000 visitors. The foundation had hired 8 full-time staff members and twice as many part-time guides. Marcus had moved out of his truck, though not into anything fancy, just a small apartment above what used to be an empty storefront. He didn't need much. Most of his time was spent at the museum anyway, giving tours, talking to visitors, sharing Walter's story. Elena officially became his co-director that spring, and sometime during the endless meetings and late-night planning sessions, their partnership had shifted into something deeper. She moved into his small apartment in May, bringing her books and her pragmatism, and her ability to keep him grounded when the pressure of managing a successful non-profit threatened to overwhelm him. They were in the vault one evening after closing, updating specimen labels, when she said, "You know Emily would be proud of you, right?" Marcus stopped, surprised. They didn't talk about Emily much. "You think so? I know so. You told me once. She believed in using gifts the way they were intended. You've done that. You've taken something that could have made you wealthy but isolated, and turned it into something that lifts an entire community. That's using it right." He set down the label maker and pulled Elena close. "I couldn't have done this without you." "I know," she said with a smile. "But you would have tried. That's what I love about you. You're stubborn enough to believe impossible things can work." By the second anniversary, the museum had expanded into educational programming. They offered workshops on mineral identification, geology field trips, summer camps for kids interested in earth sciences. Dr. Morrison joined the board and helped develop curriculum. Universities sent students for internships. International collectors visited and donated specimens to the permanent collection, wanting to be part of Walter's legacy. Marcus thought about Walter often, wondered what the old man would think of what his collection had become. Sometimes, late at night, when the museum was quiet, Marcus would sit in front of Walter's photograph and update him. "We had 130 school kids today. Half of them had never seen a real mineral specimen before. One asked if he could be a geologist when he grows up. I think you'd like that. I think you'd be proud." Timber Ridge had transformed from a dying mining town into something new, a destination, a community with purpose. Population had climbed back over 500. The school added a new wing. Young families bought the empty houses and fixed them up. Main Street filled with businesses. It wasn't the boom times of the mine era, but it was sustainable, real, built on something that wouldn't run out or shut down. Marcus's transformation was equally profound. The broken man who'd lived in his truck, barely surviving, had become a community leader, someone people looked to for guidance and inspiration. He spoke at Rotary clubs and schools, sharing his story, emphasizing that second chances don't come from luck, but from choosing to see value in unexpected places. He still guided wilderness trips occasionally, taking small groups into the mountains he loved. But now he came back to a home, a partner, a purpose. On the third anniversary of finding the vault, the foundation held a special ceremony. They'd commissioned a bronze statue of Walter Hutchins, sculpted from photographs and descriptions, showing him examining a mineral specimen with that focused passion visible in his old journals. They placed it in front of the museum, a permanent tribute to the man whose vision had started everything. Marcus gave another speech that day. 3 years ago, I stood in this spot with nothing. Today, I stand here with everything. Not money, though the museum generates enough to sustain itself and support education. Not fame, though I've been interviewed more times than I ever wanted. But community, purpose, the knowledge that one person's passion, protected and shared, can ripple outward in ways they never imagined. Walter Hutchins never knew me, but he saved my life. He saved this town, and he'll continue saving people. Every student who visits this museum and feels wonder, every person who sees these specimens and remembers that Earth creates miracles, every community that learns you can protect beautiful things and make them accessible simultaneously. That's legacy. That's what matters. Not what you accumulate, but what you give and how long it echoes after you're gone. That evening, after the ceremony, Marcus and Elena hiked up to the ridge above the museum. They could see the town below, lights twinkling in the gathering dusk, smoke rising from chimneys, cars moving on streets that had been empty not long ago. "You did this," Elena said. "All of this." Marcus shook his head. "Walter did this. I just followed through." "No. Walter collected minerals. You built a future. There's a difference." She leaned against him. "What's next? You've accomplished everything you set out to do. Museums thriving, towns revived, scholarships are funding students. Where do you go from here?" He thought about that question. A few years ago, he wouldn't have had an answer. Would have said he was just trying to get through the day. But now, standing on this mountain, looking down at the life he'd helped rebuild, he knew exactly what came next. "We keep building," he said. "We expand the educational programs. We partner with more universities. We document every piece in the collection, so future generations can learn from it. We tell Walter's story to everyone who'll listen. And we keep proving that communities can come back, that broken things can be fixed, that investing $2 and all your faith in something is sometimes the smartest decision you'll ever make." Elena smiled. "That's a good answer." They stayed on the ridge until stars filled the sky, the same stars Walter had looked at during his decades alone on this mountain, the same stars Marcus had stared at from his truck when he thought his life was over. But now, looking at those stars, Marcus didn't feel despair or loneliness. He felt gratitude for Walter's gift, for Elena's partnership, for a community that had stood by him, for the chance to transform tragedy into purpose, for learning that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't what you find, but what you choose to do with them. Because anyone can stumble onto something valuable, but it takes courage, vision, and faith to turn that discovery into something that matters, to protect it, share it, and watch it change lives. Marcus had done that. A struggling mountain man who'd bought a collapsing cabin for $2 and found beneath it not just 280 million in minerals, but a reason to keep living, a way to honor the dead, and a path to help the living. That was worth more than any collection of rare stones. That was legacy. That was love. That was everything. As they walked back down to the museum, Marcus stopped one more time in front of Walter's statue. He touched the bronze hand holding that mineral specimen. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting, for believing someone would come, for showing me that the value of things isn't in what they cost, but in what they inspire us to become." The statue didn't answer. It didn't need to. The museum glowing behind it, the town thriving below it, the lives changed by what had been hidden and then revealed. That was answer enough. Walter's voice echoed through everything Marcus had built, and it would echo for generations to come, in every child who visited and dreamed of becoming a geologist, in every student funded by scholarships, in every community member who'd watched their dying town come back to life. Some investments pay returns that can't be measured in dollars. Marcus had learned that the hard way, through loss and pain, and a $2 cabin that held the secret to rebuilding not just his life, but an entire town's future. And standing there in the Colorado night, surrounded by mountains and memories and the quiet promise of tomorrow, he finally understood what Emily had tried to tell him before she died. That life gives second chances to those brave enough to look for them. That broken things can be more valuable than whole things if you have the wisdom to see their potential. That sometimes the smallest investment of faith can yield the greatest returns of meaning. Marcus Thorne had bought a cabin for $2. What he'd really bought was a second chance at life, at love, at purpose. And he'd made the most of every penny. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that will move you. Click to keep discovering with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the smallest investments lead to the greatest transformations.